Hello, this is David Oh. Thank you for joining me once again for another hour of information from experts who really know what they're talking about. They live the life. They really want you to know what they know, at least what they can provide in the short amount of time that we have. So joining me today are three excellent guests. The first is Gary Tuggle. He is the special agent in charge for the DEA for the Philadelphia field office, and our topic that we're going to talk to him about is combating this current heroin epidemic. Our next guest is an entertainment lawyer, Alexander Murphy Jr., Esquire, and among the types of entertainment law that he practices, he actually deals with filmmaking. Major motion pictures, local films, documentaries, and we're going to spotlight him a little bit, find out, kind of how he got in the field, what he exactly does, and what he thinks about the Philadelphia environment, our region, for filmmaking. And then finally, we answer a question each week, and I'll tell you that if you got a question, send me an email, davidoRadioshow@gmail.com. And our question this week is, how do you get in shape fast? And particularly from a woman's point of view. Maybe you got 30 days to get to that beach, or you got 30 days for that high school reunion, or maybe it's a wedding. And so we'll be talking to Natalie Boss. She is a fitness nutritionist, and she'll give us her opinion on what's the best way to do that. Let me thank the show's sponsor, because this show is brought to you by Weinerman Pain and Wellness. They do a fantastic job with people who have been injured and need to get back to work or to as full a life as possible, both physically and mentally. Weinerman Pain and Wellness do a wonderful job, and I appreciate their support of this show. And I thank all our advertisers and sponsors. If you recall, last week we had a very intelligent discussion with Tim Williams, the Executive Director of the Philadelphia Veterans Multi-Service Center, former full-bird Colonel, U.S. Army Special Forces, and Mike Manning, CEO of Care Partners Plus, also a former officer in the U.S. Army Special Forces. We were talking about technologies that combat suicide, homelessness, and substance abuse. And if you want to hear that show, or any of the other shows that we have here, you can go to my YouTube page, which is In the Know with David O. YouTube.com, In the Know with David O. You can also check it out at this station at www.wwdbam.com. Well, let me introduce our first guest. His name is Gary Tuggle. He has a wealth of experience and leadership, over 30 years, and he is with the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. He started as a Baltimore City police officer, and in 1992 he joined the DEA and was assigned to the Baltimore District Office. He graduated first in his basic agent class and was transferred to the Miami Field office there. He worked on complex international drug investigations. He was assigned overseas numerous occasions. He was transferred to the Chicago field office and has done work in countries such as Trinidad and Barbados and other locations. He ends up being the special agent in charge of the Philadelphia Field Division, which is a very senior executive position. He holds 2 master's degrees, at least from what I know of, 2 master's degrees, and from, among others, Johns Hopkins University. And so, let me welcome Gary Tuggle.
David, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us here today. I mean, it's all in the news, heroin, opioid epidemic. It's just, kind of a scale we haven't seen before.
Sure, absolutely. Let me put it in some historical perspective for you. The 3 worst drug epidemics in this country's history go back to the post-Vietnam heroin epidemic. It was very destructive, highly addictive, but largely confined to the inner city. Then you fast forward to the crack cocaine epidemic of the 80s, extremely violent, highly addictive, but again, largely confined to the inner city. So then you jump to this particular heroin epidemic. This heroin epidemic dwarfs the other two epidemics collectively because it's got a feeder system to it that the other two didn't have, and that's the misuse and abuse of prescription opioids.
And just for our listeners, what kind of impact are you talking when you talk about the abuse and misuse of opioids?
Well, let me just give you an example of how prevalent the distribution of prescription opioids are in this country. In the state of Pennsylvania alone, in 2015, approximately 475 million hydrocodone were dispensed. Hydrocodone, oxycodone, oxycontin in the state. That's enough to give every Pennsylvanian, all 12.6 million, 37 dosage units each. Mm-hmm. So it just gives you an idea of the insatiable appetite that we have, not just as a state, but as a country, because we represent less than 5% of the world's population, or right around 5%, yet we consume 99% of the hydrocodone produced in the world. So if we're using 99%, what's the rest of the world doing for pain?
Right, right. And there's a lot to this discussion, and you have been fully engaged in all aspects of this discussion. You know, one of the things that people need to know, because, you know, myself, you know, when I was growing up, people would prescribe Percocets. I thought they'd been around for like 1,000 years, but actually they're relatively new.
Well, let me just talk about when we start to see the emergence of this current opioid epidemic. It started probably 2001, 2002, and it was based in large part to these pain clinics that were popping up all throughout the U.S., particularly in the southeast U.S. And southern U.S. and in Florida, where we would see literally busloads of people coming from throughout the country to get these opioid prescriptions from these what we call rogue practitioners or pain clinics. Right. Those are the folks that, to me, that are no better than the folks that are out dealing heroin. As a matter of fact, they're worse, because these practitioners took an oath to do no harm, yet they do it every single day.
I think the term is white coat drug dealers.
That's what I call them. That's what I've coined, the white coat drug dealers in the country. And look, I don't want to give all registrants, just so that you know, David, all doctors, dentists, practitioners are licensed by DEA if they dispense, distribute, or manufacture controlled substances. So, and we regulate about 1.7 million of them. We estimate that less than 1% of those are what we refer to as rogue. Right. Those are the ones that are out, that are actually the white coat drug dealers that we go after criminally, not just to take their licenses, but to put them in prison for dealing drugs. And then you have the other 99% that are very well intentioned, but in some cases have overprescribed, not recognizing the hazards in doing so.
Do you think it's possible for us to really address this problem without really dealing with the fact is we as Americans find it like necessary to feel no pain, and we want to have as much medication as possible?
That's a very good question, David. Again, we as Americans have an insatiable appetite for drugs, both licit and illicit. And it's based in part to this cavalier attitude that we have about drug use. Again, if you look at what the amount of drugs that we consume the amount of licit drugs.
Right.
So the hydrocodone, 99% produced in the world. The oxycontin, oxycodone, 80 to 85% produced in the world. Right. It's sad to see how much we consume, but in addition to that, it goes back to this cavalier attitude that we have about drug use that has to change. That thought has to change fundamentally if we're going to recover from this problem successfully.
Yeah, and let me say, like, I'm a big supporter of medical marijuana. I believe it's a great alternative. People may differ, but I do find it interesting that some of the nicest people in the world, they have a very, different idea of, for example, marijuana. Marijuana, the harmless drug, marijuana, the cool drug, marijuana, the drug that does no harm, and yet you have seen in overseas countries just how violent and how vile these cartels are when they deal with farmers and regular folks. I mean, just the mutilation, it's just a terrible, terrible thing. And yet we are, in a way, the cause of it, because we have all the money in the world to spend on these drugs, and as you said, a cavalier attitude.
Exactly. Well, look, the marijuana trade, particularly international, is a very violent trade. I've spent time in Mexico and Colombia and watched how these peasant farmers were treated, slaughtered in many cases. But the way we view marijuana in this country isn't very healthy for us. To suggest that marijuana doesn't lead to other drug use like cocaine, like heroin, and opioids, other prescription opioids, is very naive at best. To suggest that it should be something that should be legalized for whomever wants it really puts a knife into the Americans as a culture, and I'll tell you why. Because we need to look at reducing the demand for drugs in this country, not creating more demand. We need to reduce the demand. We do a really, really good job of going after the supply side of it. But it's when we send these mixed messages, particularly to our young people, that, you know, one drug is okay to use, but don't use this other drug, right? Well, we don't tell them that the other drug that they're telling them, that they're saying it's okay to use, could potentially lead to the more dangerous drug. And we need to be very, very careful about that.
Let me then focus on your job specifically,
Sure.
Because while you're involved in all these policy issues, and I see you at all the task force meetings and out in the public, but in fact, what is the role of the DEA in Philadelphia?
Okay, so I'm the DEA special agent in charge. So I'm in charge of all enforcement and regulatory efforts in the states of Pennsylvania and Delaware. We regulate almost 78,000 registrants between the two states. These are, again, individuals and organizations that are licensed by us and those states, in these states rather, to manufacture, dispense, and prescribe controlled substances.
And what is the current situation that you face outside of just the regulation aspect with, for example, the illegal smuggling in of heroin in today's environment?
Well, it's a challenging environment in as much as any way that you can conceive that one would, or these drug trafficking groups or transnational criminal organizations would want to get drugs to market, right, to fill that insatiable demand. They'll do it. They'll cut open puppies. They will insert drugs in corpses. Any type of commerce that you can imagine coming into the country, particularly from Mexico and in many cases Colombia, but other places in Central and South America, you can probably find drugs being smuggled as well.
With today's technology, everything from drones to just communications at an unprecedented level than ever before, GPS, all that, and then our waterways, I mean our coastline, with the kind of cut in funding for the U.S. Coast Guard. How do you manage, kind of protecting the borders from narco-terrorism and drug smuggling?
Well, it's funny you use the term narco-terrorism because that's very true. The drug trafficking groups or transnational criminal organizations that are responsible for the drugs coming in here literally terrorize people. We have to be sort of hyper-vigilant in terms of trying to reduce demand and trying to protect our waterways. But to be candid with you, David, we're a victim of our own geography at the end of the day. We've got some of the most accessible waterways in the world, some of the most sophisticated infrastructure in terms of highway systems. in the world. So that makes us literally a victim of our own success. But we need to look more at reducing the level of demand in this country.
Okay.
We have to, look, if we can prevent people from using drugs in the beginning, or see somebody treated and not use drugs after that, you deny revenue to the upstream drug trafficker, right? Which is what we all ultimately want to do. We want to hit them in the pocket. And in order to do that, we have to reduce the level of demand in this country. That's not going to be easy to do, but at the same time, we have to look at a changing of this cultural thought that we have, or thought process that we have, in terms of the cavalier attitude about drug use.
You know, when I was in the DA's office back in the mid-'80s, and I'll tell you plainly, I mean the listeners, you know, our perspective, myself as a young, assistant DA in Philadelphia, was that cocaine and all these type of things, violent drug gangs that were selling controlled substances out in the street, that we were trying to lock them up as long as possible as kind of a deterrent. You know, it was the common thought in those days that if you would lock people up for a long period of time, you would curtail the drug trade, because people wouldn't want to get out on the streets and sell. And that attitude has changed, obviously. What is the new attitude on how to address these issues? Okay,
well, drug traffickers should be in jail, right? Because they literally prey on the misery of the citizenry. But we can't arrest our way out of this. We need to have communities play a larger role in terms of prevention, because again, we're really, really good at going after the supply side in terms of dismantling particularly these transnational criminal organizations. We do an outstanding job of that. But as long as we have this level of demand, there's always going to be somebody to step up and fill that void, right? So we need to work on that side of it. So again, we need to go back to preventing people from using in the beginning, right? Seeing those that want to be treated, get treatment so that they can stop using, and then denying that revenue to the drug trafficking groups. And that's a force multiplier for law enforcement. So it's got to be a multi-pronged approach. It's not just a law enforcement problem. It's not just a community problem. It's not just a regulatory problem. It has to be treated equally on all sides.
Let me ask you this. I mean, I tell people, I say this a few times on this radio show, I remember as a child going to public school in southwest Philadelphia, Cobb Street, not one of the best neighborhoods, and looking at a little comic book about a guy who was on heroin, and his wife kept saying, you got to stop, and he kept saying, honey, if you would try it, you know what I'm talking about. And so she ends up trying it, becomes a prostitute, and at the end of the comic book, he gets cleaned up and he's off drugs with his wife, And I was probably like under 10 years old. And after reading that comic book, I said, listen, that's a bad thing. I'm not going to do that. And listen, I come from a bad neighborhood. A lot of kids did drugs or tried drugs. But I don't see the same amount of effort in our public schools and in our communities to try to teach kids about, hey, that's not something you want to do. And kids are very critical of their older brother and sister, and they're like, oh, hey, look at that dummy, they're doing this stuff, I'm not going to do it. But why isn't there the level of education and prevention for the next generation?
Well, there should be. Again, we need to try to get out ahead of this thing, in as much as our young people need to know how dangerous the path to drug use is in terms of destruction. Just to give you an example, last night there was a pregnant woman who, in the Kensington area actually, who was revived twice in a 45-minute period from overdoses. These are two separate overdoses with the same person in a 45-minute span, right? And this is a pregnant and expecting mother, right? How much more horrific does it get than that? I don't think it does. I don't think it does. So we've got to do some out-of-the-box things in terms of educating our kids so that they don't go down that path in the beginning. And I think that sending them mixed messages is the wrong thing to do.
Another topic that comes up, especially in the African American community, is, hey, when this was our problem in the black community, in the inner city, nobody cared. And now that it's a white problem out in the suburb and the rich kids are dying, people care.
Well, you know, I grew up on the east side of Baltimore, much like you, a very, very tough part of the city. I grew up around and seeing lots of drug use and the destruction that it caused. So for me, it was a problem from the very beginning, right? And I never realized just how much of a problem it wasn't for other communities. But what I can do is, what I can tell you is that in my 33-year career, what I've seen is the problem moved past race. It has moved to the point where America is a culture, the fabric of America is being destroyed because of this insatiable appetite that we have. And again, this cavalier attitude that we have. If we don't stop this, or at least slow it down in the near future, we're going to be at serious risk of losing really bright kids, right, to death and destruction, losing the social-economic impact of this. I can't tell you, is in the billions of dollars already,
Yes.
And it's getting worse. The loss of talent, the detriment to the family unit. It's just, you know, folks dropping out of college, out of high school, you know, and we're seeing addicts being created at much younger ages.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, listen, I find the race thing to be a bit divisive. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about people, and there's a lot more people in every category that is suffering right now. We really should address it. For our listeners, how does the average citizen interact with the DEA?
Well, the average citizen usually doesn't. Usually the average citizen interacts with state and local police. However, DEA has, under our 360 strategy, which you've experienced in terms of the summits and things, is made a concerted effort to get more into the community to help with educating the public with respect to where we are with this epidemic and how destructive it is to the community, but also to sort of empower communities and try to improve quality of life in the communities that are hardest hit. Which is why you saw so active, or you see us so active in the Kensington area of the city. We're in schools, you know, we're talking to schools. And look, I've got about 370 people that work for me, and I encourage them all to get involved in their own communities with respect to this problem. Schools, churches, community events, be active in trying to stop this problem, because it's serious. You know, one of the things that I see is that people have a tendency to get desensitized to stuff once they see it over and over and over again. It's sort of like the old PTSD, right? Not old, but it's a symptom of that. And when I look at areas of not just this city, but Baltimore and other major metropolitan cities, I see the plight of despair, and I see kids literally walking by to get to school, walking by this stuff every single day, right? And they become desensitized to it. And when that happens, you know, it's really a cultural hit for us, because their quality of life is not where it should be at that point, and kids shouldn't have to see this stuff.
Right. And for our listeners, you could actually go to like DEA school and things like that for citizens. But in our last minute, kind of, if people want to kind of figure out how to invite you or to invite the office out to their events, or to find resources, how can they get in touch with you or your staff?
Sure, you can go to www.dea.gov and look for Philadelphia Field Division, and all of the contact information will be right there.
All right, well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having us.
All right, listen, everyone, stay tuned. We'll be right back with Alexander Murphy, Jr., Esquire, entertainment lawyer, and he's going to talk about his life in the filmmaking aspect of his career. All right, and we are back. We were just talking to Gary Tuggle, you know, special agent in charge, the Philadelphia field office, which is all of Pennsylvania and the state of Delaware. And we are going to be talking to Alex Murphy, but first let me just shout out that, listen, if you support our military, and I know many of my listeners do, in particular for the U.S. Army Green Berets, I am having a benefit dinner on Friday, October the 6th, 6 to 9 p.m. At a place called Saigon Maxim Restaurant. It's actually a pretty big place. It's like 350 people in their banquet area. It's at 6th and Washington Avenue. Why don't you join me? Tickets are only $65, includes dinner, live entertainment. We'll be joined by Danny Swift Garcia, WBC, WBA World Boxing Champion, international DJ Casper, who produced the music for Deadpool and the TV show Empire. American Dinosaur, great rock band, and the Second Street Irish Society Pipes and Drums, so you know it's going to be good. We're going to have great raffle items and auction items, door prizes, and all that. We're honored that Governor Rendell, Speaker Mike Turzai, and former Undersecretary of the Army Patrick Murphy will be joining us, as well as 3 outstanding speakers, all former Green Berets. Sergeant Major retired Albert Slogoski, Nick Freitas, who is actually a delegate in Virginia, like a state rep in Virginia, and Mike Manning, who's been a guest on my show, CEO of Care Partners Plus. So please note that down. Friday, October the 6th, 6 to 9 at 6th and Washington, Saigon Maxim Restaurant. At an event where you can actually meet our next guest in person and actually hear legal advice, and really it's kind of not so much legal advice as it is very directly how to finance, produce, and distribute the film. So many people are into filmmaking, and we have such talented people, but finding money, getting your film distributed. He's done major motion pictures, he's done local films, he's done documentaries, so he knows what he's talking about, and he'll be backed up by 4 outstanding people: Daphne Yache, Gabriella Watson Arazo, Devin Hampton, Rel Daldo, also filmmakers who have been able to successfully get their films to market. But now, let's say hello to Alex Murphy, Jr. Alex, how are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you for including me today. Good to see you again.
Well, you're a very accomplished...
I do have to say one
Yes.
thing very, very quickly, because the listeners may not have. It's very intimidating to be on a panel where there's a trainer in the room. I mean, I didn't know I had to do sit-ups.
Right now.
You didn't tell us we had to do
She's
sit-ups
checking off her
before.
list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that he's talking about Natalie Boss. You'll be able to hear her when we get to our, question of the week. But Alex, I'm going to just summarize, because we have just such a limited time with you, that you're a top-notch entertainment attorney, but you have also extensive experience in the area of filmmaking. But let me start with this: how did you get into entertainment law?
Okay. Let me mention, by the way, Rel Daldell
Yes.
is going to be on the panel. I did the legal work on his first film that he directed.
Oh,
That's
okay,
how far back that
small
is.
world.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
here in Philadelphia. How did I get? Oh, okay. Here we go. History time. How did I get into? After graduating high school,
Yes.
Collingswood High School nearby, across the river. But I was born in Philadelphia, so don't
Yes.
hold it against me. I went to Westchester University, majored in music. Did you go to
I
Westchester?
went to Westchester too.
Oh, it's great. Go Ram. Anyway, sorry, we'll get back to the show here. So I went and majored in music. While I was there, I got signed to Decca Records with a band when I was in college.
Yes.
And we toured. Afterwards, I was playing with a jazz group and toured with them. After I graduated, I went back and taught for years as a grad teaching assistant at the School of Music at Westchester. And I think it was my last run on the tour. I was in my early 20s, not married. The leader of the band was, I think at 45, had 5 children. And even at 22, occasionally, common sense does kick in, even at that age. I looked around and I said, do I want to be doing that when I'm 45 years old with 5 children, 9 months of the year, different city every night? So I looked around and I said, I think I might want to do something different. What do I want to do? And I thought, what could I do to stay close to the industry,
Right.
but not have to live on the bus?
Right.
So I decided to go to law school. I thought, I'll go. Back in those era, you know, if you didn't like it, you could drop out. Today it's a disgrace, but anyway.
Right.
I went. After the first year, law school almost drove me back to the bus, but I stuck it out. And I went to law school specifically to be an entertainment lawyer. If I weren't going to be an entertainment attorney, I would have headed for Tahiti, started a jazz trio, sat on the beach under the the thatched roof, and had a tequila once in a while, I guess. But
So let's start with the fact
that's
that,
how I got into entertainment.
Yeah, so let's start with the fact that kind of like you're on the same wavelength as your clients in some creative sense. But you end up not only doing, music and all that, you find your way into film. How did that happen?
I primarily, because I came out of the music business, my practice was exclusively music in the beginning. And then I started doing some licensing of music for TV shows and movies, and started meeting some people on the other side. And they started bringing work. I mean, it's much like any business, it's who's knocking on your door. And they started coming over, and I started getting more of those kind of clients. And to be honest with you, as I got older, I realized that you did more of the work for film during the day, rather than 2 in the morning at a club, waiting for MCA Records to show up. So as things came in, I gradually, over the years, started pushing my practice into the film TV direction.
Yeah, and for the listeners, let me say that Russ Striner, you may know Night of the Living Dead, is or was a client.
Pittsburgh.
Violetta Wallace, who is the mother of Notorious B.I.G., and you did the rights for the movie Notorious B.I.G.
Yeah, a woman that I was sharing an office with represented her and B.I.G. from the very beginning. And they walked in one day with a contract to option the life story. She walked into my office and said, "What is this?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know what a hip-hop recording contract looks like." So we used to move things around.
Oh, okay. And then Steve Perry, Lethal Weapon producer.
Steve Perry, yes. He's leaving he's left Warner Brothers.
Yes.
And we're in the midst of, he's buying land in Salt Lake City. Going to build a studio there, getting a film fund together, and going to launch a whole new program out there. I'm hoping that maybe he'll have in his budget a nice little small apartment for me to visit occasionally,
Right,
but
right.
we'll see. Yeah.
Now, sometimes your work takes you onto the set of the movies. And how does that happen? How does a lawyer end up kind of like on the set of a movie?
Well, the first thing you do is you call and find out which days they're having Italian food, Mexican food, Indian food. Stay away from the burgers then. But no, it depends on where it is. We usually don't have to be on set,
Right.
because the way film works, by the time a film is filming, it's into principal photography. They've gone through pre-production, and every single day of filming is like engineering, every minute, etc. So unless I'm troubleshooting, but if it's nearby, like for instance, we did the Mighty Max, about the Immaculata basketball team, which was shot here at Immaculata. So it's nearby, and it'd be fun to pop over, but going to a set is like watching paint dry. It's really boring. You hang out where the food is. Yeah, but you go, just ring it up and show up. It's always fun to do once, but it's more fun to be in the production office where everybody's screaming and yelling at each other.
Right. Now, one of the experiences that you've had, which is very interesting to me for our upcoming seminar and panel, is that you represented one of the major investors in the movie Gandhi. I really love that movie.
Well, I represent there was a company that had the money that I was doing legal work for, meaning it wasn't a person.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
so I didn't want to
Company.
mislead.
Yes.
Well, I usually don't represent the investors, like Steve Perry.
Right.
Part of the money's coming from China, part of the money's coming from different places. Usually, the nature of my practice is I'm representing the producer,
Right.
who's out there looking for the money from the big places, or the doctors, dentists, gynecologists, and Aunt Hilda, who's rich, hopefully.
Right. But you end up representing this company, and what was the whole story, with the financing end on the movie Gandhi?
Oh, Gandhi. Oh my goodness. Got to rewind this. You didn't tell me you're going to ask this
Hey,
question. I want to get
15 seconds.
Okay, I want to get this right. Okay, ready? Attenborough,
Yes.
who was directing. It was money from Columbia Pictures and money from the country of India, some businessmen who owned a theater chain. And IFI, which is a company, they had done Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory, Escape from New York back then, and they were way over budget because Attenborough was just, you know.
Gary,
so, long story
he's
short.
seen Escape from New York several times.
Oh, okay.
To my dismay, right?
Do you, by the way, if they do a sequel, do you want an extras role?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah, okay, we're going to do this for you. Anyway, long story short, they were way over budget because Attenborough was just filming over and over. It may have something to do with Candice Bergen was in the movie, but I'm not sure. But anyway, and they were going to close it down. And IFI came in and brought in the finishing funds, actually, and everybody thought they were crazy because, you know, God, you think about it now, back then it was, well, the film's about this little bald guy running around the desert with a sheep. Who's going to go see that movie? You know, they didn't think it commercially was going to make a lot of money because it's so historical. And it did. In fact, they have so much footage left over, they could probably do an 8-hour miniseries.
Really?
Yeah,
It's a great movie. Great movie.
Never got to meet Candace, though, I have to tell you.
How about
Yeah.
Ben Kingsley?
Yeah, so.
Hey, yeah, he's fantastic. One of the things you do is you teach, you lecture and all that, and one of the, I'm looking at one of the topics, and the topic is the influence of globalization on film financing. Interesting topic. Now, I'm going to have to stop there because we've run out of time.
Okay.
But listen, everybody, if you want to meet Alex Murphy, if you want to talk to him, if you have an idea, if you're looking for funds, come out to the free seminar at Community College. It's September the 28th, 6 to 8 p.m., Community College of Philadelphia. So check it out.
Free legal advice.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
No. And so listen, stay tuned because you're going to get some free fitness advice when we get back from this commercial break. And we are back. Listen, my next guest has a life motto, quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Hey, that's from the movie Gandhi. Well, it's not from the movie. The movie's about Gandhi. I got that on the t-shirt, but I like that motto. Her name is Natalie Boss, and she has a company, Body by Boss. She says, "Be your own boss in fitness, health, and life." And a little fun facts about her. She is born and raised in Philadelphia. She has a black belt in Taekwondo, a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and is a nationally qualified figure competitor. And actually, she says she's recovered from an eating disorder. And so she's here to answer our question, but let's first get to know her a little more because I know she does nutrition and all that stuff. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David O. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and you pretty much hit the nail on the head. A few additional things that I like to do. I am a fitness coach as well at Maxercise Academy, where I teach women's fitness and boot camp and nutrition there. I am an entrepreneur running my own business with the Body by Boss, but I also am a clinical dietitian at Virtua Hospital in New Jersey.
Okay.
So I'm wearing a lot of hats, trying a lot of different things. But yeah, the bodybuilding stuff, the jiu-jitsu, that's all my passion and hobby, just to stay fit and to stay healthy. That I find it's best and fun for me. But
okay, so here is our question. Our question, and sometimes I have to read into the question. The question is basically, how do you get in shape fast? And there's a lot of kind of like implied things, like in a healthy way, in a way that doesn't run you down. And this comes from a woman, and so I'm going to ask you to focus. For women, what would you advise? Someone says, hey, oh my goodness, in 30 days I'm going to the beautiful islands, I'll be on the beach, I need a beach body. Someone says, oh my goodness, it's my high school reunion, or you know, it's that fantastic wedding coming. I got 30 days and I want to really make this count.
absolutely. I mean, I literally get this question every single day, and I'm going to tell you what I tell all my patients and clients verbatim. So to start, the bottom line when it comes to any kind of weight loss is you have to burn more calories than you eat. That's just the science behind it. So 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of fat. So if you burn that much, it could be in one day, it could be in 1 week, it could be in 3 months, you're going to burn 1 pound. So obviously you want to stick to maybe 1 to 2 pounds a week ideally for a healthy lifestyle. But I understand to get healthy, get slim down quick scenario, and sometimes there's dire situations where you need to do that quick. And so I have some top tips here that I wrote down, really wanted to talk to you guys about that I live by and I think are super, super important, that they're also applicable to maintain afterwards. So it's not like I'm asking you to do a whole bunch of crazy stuff. Maybe some of them people might not agree, but these really, really help. And if you know a little bit of the science behind it, I think knowledge is power. So if you know a little bit of the reason why, it will help you want to maybe keep it off and stick with it.
Okay, so let's say the desire to get in shape quick, look good in 30 days is just a step towards a healthier, fitter lifestyle.
Exactly. I like the things is making small changes to your lifestyle change, and not just think of it 30 days and then throw it away. If you can do small implements that will help long term, then it's just not going to feel much of a task, and it's going to be just kind of smoothly go into it, because I like to promote the lifestyle aspect, which is long term.
Yes.
But for the 30-day quick fest, one of the first things I have is avoid alcohol. So I already know I'm going to be getting buzzed from that. That was the big doozy.
I'm sorry, people. You know, you want to get that magic body in 30 days, stop drinking.
But there are ways, if you are going to drink, to do healthier options. Obviously, stick to the most simplest things. You got wine, you got scotch, things like that, as opposed to those sugary beverages where they add all that extra sugar. That's obviously calories. And really, when it comes down to the alcohol, it really is just the calories. That's really what's go. If you're drinking, 12 beers a night, that's calories. And going back to my first point, you're going to lose weight with calories burned versus calories consumed. So if you cut out alcohol, most of the time you're cutting calories, and that might be all you need to drop some weight. Because believe me, people have done that and they've dropped 10 pounds in a week, and they're like, did it really work that fast? I'm like, yes, it really does. Especially because people don't look up the calories in beer, so or things like that. So they don't really know how many calories it has. So avoid alcohol would be my number one. Another one would be fried food. Fried food obviously is associated, it's like notorious for the high fat, high calorie. But the little bit of science behind the fried food is not only is it unhealthy fats, but it's also high in sodium. And in the body, when we have too much sodium, we actually retain water. It's just like the way our body tries to balance it. So when we're having a lot of salty foods, that's like where we feel our bloatedness, our puffiness, and that's our, quote, water weight. So that's a lot of times people in those 30 days mostly lose a lot of water weight. So that could just come from sticking to a cleaner diet of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, but trying to minimize those salty foods. So even foods such as chips and crackers, getting low sodium options. If you do a lot of canned foods, you want to stick to more fresh foods, because that stuff, anything on the shelves, I call the inside of the grocery store your vortex, because the second you walk in and go into the aisles with all the appealing marketing strategies, you're going to get sucked into the vortex, you're going to start buying all this stuff. So stick to the perimeter of the grocery stores. That's where all your main kind of food sources are, and that's going to provide you with the nutritious foods that you need. But regardless, the salty foods, if you reduce that, that's what's going to help to reduce you retaining that fluid, which is another source of having weight. Another one kind of bounces off that is drink a lot of water. When you drink a lot of water, you flush out the toxins. So in addition to decreasing the amount of salt, if you increase the amount of water, you're going to really provide hydration, which most of the time, most of the Americans are dehydrated, whether or not they have the symptoms. It's just because our body is, 9% water, right? We definitely don't drink as much water as we need to have sustainable just biological processes. So really making sure that we stay hydrated, it's going to help flush out those toxins. That's going to help us look better and just help us lose weight as well. And a lot of the times that helps also with bloatedness in the belly area, which obviously is our big thing. We're trying to get into a bikini.
Yeah, that's key. Belly area, yeah.
Yeah, so those are some top ones. The other two that I want to touch on, this one is a big one I get all the time, carbs. All right, carbs are not bad for you, but I will be kind of like a devil's advocate here when it comes to carbs, because I always promote carbs. They are healthy. They are really going to help with our brain health and just keeping us cognitive throughout the day. They are supposed to give us energy. However, when you're trying to diet for a short period of time, it is actually very beneficial to decrease your carbs for a short amount of time. Carbs are an anabolic, which means they build muscle, but they can also promote fat gain. So when it comes to that, it's really just portion size, portion control with your carbs, and also choosing healthier carbs. Healthier carb options could be sweet potato, brown rice, bananas, berries, things like that. Just pretty much going back to that whole foods kind of scenario. If it's in a package, get rid of it. Stick to the whole foods and just, have maybe one banana, not 3 throughout the day. Just something like that. Like just sticking to portion size, sticking to whole foods, and you can still have your carbs.
What are bad carbs?
Bad carbs are going to be like chips and pretzels and anything that's man-made and processed.
Chocolate chip cookies with
Like muffins, like muffins and cookies and all that stuff.
yes, everything you like is bad. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. But like carbs are in vegetables, so that is a way to get your carbs in. Nobody's going to really take that route most of the time. But that is a way. Fruit is also a good way too because it's sweet, so it satisfies our sweet tooth. But you can be, go to sleep happy at night because you know you're doing something well for your body. It does provide fiber to help with your digestion as well. But there's a good healthier carb option. So I wanted to touch real quick on the Atkins diet because I know so many people turn to that when it comes to losing weight. And because of what I just said, there is science behind why it's efficient because when you decrease your carbs, you're dipping into your fat stores that your body's going to be using for your energy because you're not giving it carbs that it wants to use for energy. So it's going to do that. So it does work, but you can't do it long term because then your body's going to start going crazy because your brain actually needs carbs to function. Mm-hmm. That's why it doesn't work long term, and you gain that weight back when you start just like going crazy after being on a diet. But with the Atkins diet, most of the time they promote just heavy protein.
Right.
Because they're doing no carbs, so there's some way you have to stay full. But what I want to tell you guys, if you are going to use the Atkins diet, is you still want to stick to, like I said, carbs like vegetables, which they have minimal carbs in them, but stick to lean protein. So stick to eggs, stick to like Greek yogurt, stick to chicken, lean pork. Don't fall into like the deli meat trap and just pepperoni. A lot of people will get like those salty, heavy meats, which goes back to my previous point, and it's loaded with salt and heavy fats, and really that's just leading to a heart disease. So you want to just stick to the lean meats and stick to the lower carb vegetables and stuff like that. And this way it's still satisfying that Atkins diet, but it's a much healthier way to do it as opposed to loading up on dairy and loading up on the heavy meats, because that's what people tend to do and they will see results. But you also don't want to just overload your body with all that salt and fat in a short amount of time, and then it's just going to really make your body bounce back terribly. So incorporating that will slowly be a healthier way to do that. And then that's kind of what I was saying too, load up on lean meats and veggies. That's kind of what I would have hit on when it comes to the carbs. So you do want to decrease your carbs there. And then lastly is just going to be exercise. So there's cardio, which burns calories. You could do weight training, which actually just builds muscle, which just increases your metabolic rate throughout the day. So even just walking down the street, you're burning more calories than if you were just kind of sitting down. So those are some options as well to burn calories. So that's pretty much my top tips for losing weight fast, and hopefully you can do all of them, one of them, and that will make you lose weight quick and hopefully help you keep it off.
All right, fantastic. And the other thing you can do is you can get a personal trainer, go to a gym, and for that, let me just say, how do people get in touch with you? And I know you do videos and all that, so how do they learn more?
Absolutely. So I have tons of free resources. I have a YouTube channel, just search Body by Boss. I have Instagram accounts. I post all kinds of nutrition recipes, fitness workouts. That'll be Natalie Boss, NATTIEBOSS. There's going to be Natalie Boss Fit, Natalie Boss RDN for our registered dietitian nutritionist, and Natalie Boss _nutrition. I know I have a lot of resources. And then you can just go on my website, bodybyboss.com, and that's just going to have all the packages I have available for purchase.
All right, thank you. And that's our show.
Thank you for having me.